They tell you influence is about charisma, about being the loudest voice in the room, about making grand gestures and bold declarations. But 500 years ago, a man named Niccolo Machiavelli discovered something far more dangerous. He learned that true influence operates in the shadows. It whispers where others shout. It observes where others perform. And it controls without ever appearing to control at all. You see, most people believe power comes from what you say. Machiavelli knew it comes from what you don't say. While everyone else was fighting for attention, he was studying the art of strategic silence. While others were demanding respect, he was engineering it. While the world celebrated the loud and obvious, he was perfecting the subtle and invisible. This isn't about manipulation for its own sake. This is about understanding a fundamental truth that separates those who influence from those who are influenced. Because in every room, in every relationship, in every interaction, there are hidden laws at work. Laws that determine who speaks and who listens, who leads and who follows, who shapes reality and who simply reacts to it. Today, you're going to learn those laws. Not the sanitized version they teach in business schools. Not the feel-good approach that sounds noble but delivers nothing. The real laws. The ones Machiavelli observed in the brutal courts of Renaissance Italy, where a single misstep meant exile or death. Where influence wasn't a theory, it was survival. But here's what most people miss about Machiavelli. They think he was advocating for cruelty. They believe he wanted leaders to be ruthless and cold. That's not all. He was revealing how influence actually works in the real world. He was showing us that the game is already being played, whether we acknowledge it or not. And if we don't understand the rules, we become pawns in someone else's strategy. The first hidden law is this: silence commands more attention than speech. Think about the most influential people you've encountered. Not the ones who talked the most, but the ones whose words carried weight. They understood something fundamental about human psychology. When everyone is shouting, the person who remains calm becomes the center of attention. When everyone is explaining, the person who simply nods and observes becomes the one everyone watches. Machiavelli saw this principle in action during his diplomatic missions. He noticed that the most powerful figures in the room weren't always the ones speaking. They were the ones listening, calculating, choosing their moments with surgical precision. Because once you speak, you reveal your position. Once you explain, you show your weaknesses. Once you justify, you admit you need approval. But silence? Silence is a mirror. It forces others to project their own thoughts, fears, and assumptions onto you. They start wondering what you're thinking, what you know that they don't, what you might do next. And in that uncertainty, in that space between what they expect and what you reveal, influence is born. This doesn't mean being mute. It means being selective. Every word becomes a calculated move rather than an open. Every pause becomes a moment of power rather than hesitation. Every silence becomes a question that others feel compelled to answer. The second hidden law builds on the first. Mystery creates magnetism. People are drawn to what they can't fully understand. They obsess over what they can't completely access. They respect what they can't predict. Machiavelli understood that the moment people think they have you figured out, they start taking you for granted. They stop paying attention. They stop treating your words as precious. But when you remain partially unknowable, when you keep parts of yourself in shadow, something fascinating happens. People start filling in the blanks with their imagination. And their imagination is almost always more impressive than reality. They assume you're more capable, more dangerous, more valuable than you might actually be. Not because you lied to them, but because you allowed them to create their own version of you. This is why Machiavelli admired figures like Cesare Borgia. Borgia understood that perception shapes reality more than facts do. He cultivated an aura of unpredictability that made enemies hesitate and allies stay loyal. People never knew which version of him they would encounter, the generous patron or the ruthless conqueror. That uncertainty kept everyone on their toes. You can apply this same principle in your daily life. Don't reveal everything about your plans, your capabilities, or your intentions. Let people wonder. Let them speculate. Let them assume you're operating on a level they haven't quite grasped yet. Because the moment they think they understand your limits, they'll start testing them. The third hidden law is perhaps the most counterintuitive. Appearing weak can be stronger than appearing strong. This sounds backwards, but Machiavelli observed something profound about human nature. When someone appears invulnerable, others want to find their weakness. When someone appears to have everything together, others look for cracks in the facade. But when someone appears to have vulnerabilities that are actually strengths in disguise, they become untouchable. Consider how this works in practice. The leader who admits uncertainty about a complex decision appears more trustworthy than the one who claims to have all the answers. The negotiator who reveals a calculated weakness gains more leverage than the one who pretends to be invincible. The person who shows controlled vulnerability creates deeper connections than the one who maintains perfect composure. But here's the key. It must be strategic. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for genuine weakness. He was teaching the art of controlled exposure. You reveal what serves your purpose and conceal what doesn't. You show vulnerability that makes others underestimate you while hiding the strengths that will determine the outcome. This creates a psychological trap. People see what they think is weakness and assume they have the advantage. They become overconfident. They reveal their own strategies. They lower their guard. And that's when your hidden strengths become decisive. They never saw it coming because they were focused on the weakness you wanted them to see. The fourth hidden law deals with timing. The right move at the wrong time fails, but the wrong move at the right time succeeds. Machiavelli was obsessed with timing because he understood that influence isn't just about what you do. It's about when you do it. The same action can create completely different results depending on the moment you choose to act. This is why patience becomes a weapon. While others rush to react, you wait for the optimal moment. While others feel pressured to respond immediately, you allow situations to develop until the timing favors your position. While others exhaust themselves in premature battles, you conserve your energy for the decisive moment. Think about how this applies to conflicts in your life. The person who responds to every provocation loses power with each reaction. But the person who waits, who allows tension to build, who strikes only when the timing maximizes impact, that person shapes the entire dynamic. They don't just win individual battles, they control when the battles happen at all. Machiavelli saw this principle at work in political alliances. The leaders who lasted weren't the ones who made the most moves. They were the ones who made the right moves at precisely the right moments. They understood that in the game of influence, timing transforms ordinary actions into extraordinary leverage. But timing requires something most people struggle with: the ability to think beyond immediate gratification. It requires seeing the larger pattern while others focus on immediate reactions. It requires the discipline to wait when every instinct screams for action. It requires the wisdom to recognize that the most powerful move is often the one you don't make yet. These four laws, strategic silence, calculated mystery, controlled vulnerability, and perfect timing, form the foundation of Machiavellian influence. They work because they align with how human psychology actually operates, not how we wish it operated. They acknowledge that influence is a game with hidden rules, and those who understand the rules have an enormous advantage over those who pretend the game doesn't exist. But understanding these laws is only the beginning, because there's a deeper layer to Machiavellian influence that most people never discover. It's the recognition that every interaction is simultaneously happening on multiple levels. There's the surface conversation, what's being said explicitly. There's the subtext, what's being communicated indirectly. And then there's the meta level, the game being played beneath both. Most people operate only on the surface level. They hear words and respond to words. They see actions and react to actions. But the truly influential understand that the real conversation is happening in the spaces between words, in the pauses, in the things left unsaid, in the subtle shifts of energy that most people don't even notice. This is why Machiavelli spent so much time studying human nature. He realized that people rarely say what they mean or mean what they say. They operate from hidden motivations, unconscious fears, and unspoken desires. And if you can read these deeper currents, if you can understand what's really driving someone's behavior, you gain access to levels of influence that seem almost supernatural to those who don't understand the mechanism. The fifth hidden law emerges from this understanding. Control the frame. Control the outcome. The frame is the context through which people interpret what's happening. It's the lens that determines whether an action appears threatening or protective, whether a statement sounds confident or arrogant, whether a silence feels powerful or awkward. Here's what's fascinating. The person who sets the frame doesn't need to win the argument. They don't need to have the best facts or the strongest position, because once the frame is established, everything that follows gets interpreted through that lens. It's like being the architect of the building where everyone else has to live. Machiavelli observed this in diplomatic negotiations. The prince who could establish the framework for discussions, who could determine what questions were being asked and what outcomes were possible, had already won before the negotiation began. Everyone else was just operating within the reality he had constructed. You see this principle everywhere once you start looking for it. In relationships, the person who frames the conflict determines how it gets resolved. In business, whoever establishes the criteria for success shapes what victory looks like. In social situations, the person who sets the emotional tone influences how everyone else feels and behaves. But here's the crucial part. Frame control happens subtly. The moment it becomes obvious, it loses its power. It's not about forcing your perspective on others. It's about creating conditions where your perspective feels natural, inevitable, even obvious to everyone involved. The sixth hidden law reveals another layer. Make others feel they chose their submission. This might sound manipulative, but it's actually how all lasting influence works. People resist being controlled, but they embrace choices that feel like their own. The art lies in structuring situations so that the choice you want them to make appears to be their best option. Machiavelli saw this principle in how successful rulers maintained power. They didn't rely purely on force or fear. They created systems where obedience felt like the rational choice, where following their lead served people's own interests, where resistance seemed foolish rather than heroic. This requires a deep understanding of what motivates people. Everyone has core drives: security, recognition, belonging, autonomy. If you can show people how aligning with your goals serves their drives, they don't just comply. They become advocates. They defend your position as if it were their own because, in their mind, it is their own. But this only works if you genuinely understand what people want. Surface-level manipulation fails because it doesn't address real needs. It creates compliance without commitment. True influence happens when you help people get what they actually want, while also achieving what you need. The seventh hidden law addresses something most people get backwards. Respect is not earned through perfection, but through selective vulnerability. The leaders people remember aren't the ones who never made mistakes. They're the ones who made mistakes strategically, who showed humanity at precisely the right moments, who revealed struggles that made their successes more meaningful. Machiavelli understood that people connect with what they can relate to, but they're inspired by what they aspire to become. If you appear too perfect, too untouchable, too far above common struggles, people can't bridge the gap between where they are and where you stand. But if you show them a path, if you reveal that you've faced similar challenges and found ways through them, you become not just admirable, but accessible. This is why strategic vulnerability is so powerful. It's not about exposing every weakness or sharing every doubt. It's about revealing specific struggles that serve a larger purpose, that demonstrate growth, that invite others to see possibilities in their own challenges. The most influential people understand this balance. They maintain authority while showing humanity. They project strength while acknowledging the effort it required. They inspire others, not by appearing superhuman, but by revealing the very human journey that led to extraordinary results. The eighth hidden law might be the most important. Your reputation is not what you say about yourself, but what others say when you're not there. Machiavelli knew that direct self-promotion often backfires. It makes people skeptical. It raises questions about insecurity. It puts you in the position of having to prove your own claims. But when others speak on your behalf, when they share stories about your capabilities or character, when they recommend you or reference your ideas, that carries a weight that self-promotion never can, because it's perceived as objective, as genuine, as evidence rather than marketing. This means that influence is often built indirectly, through the experiences you create for others, through the value you provide without asking for credit, through the problems you solve quietly, through the way you make people feel when they interact with you. The goal isn't to control what people say about you. That's impossible, and attempts to do so usually backfire. The goal is to consistently act in ways that naturally generate the kind of stories you want people to tell, to create experiences that people want to share, to provide value that people feel compelled to acknowledge. Machiavelli observed that the most powerful figures rarely had to defend their reputations because their actions spoke louder than any words could. Their influence was confirmed not by their own testimony, but by the consistent testimony of everyone who encountered them. This creates a compound effect. As more people share positive experiences, your reputation becomes self-reinforcing. People approach you with higher expectations and more respect. They're more likely to listen to your ideas and follow your lead. They give you the benefit of the doubt in ambiguous situations. But here's where most people make a critical error. They think this means being universally liked. Machiavelli would laugh at that notion. Universal approval is impossible, and attempting to achieve it makes you powerless. What matters is being respected by the right people, being valued by those whose opinions carry weight, being remembered by those who can impact your goals. The ninth hidden law cuts to the core of everything we've discussed. True influence is measured not by compliance, but by the quality of decisions people make in your absence. Anyone can force obedience through threats or manipulation. But Machiavelli understood that lasting power comes from shaping how people think, not just how they act. When someone truly influences you, they don't just change your behavior in the moment. They change your framework for making decisions. They alter the questions you ask yourself. They shift the criteria you use to evaluate options. And once that shift happens, their influence continues working, even when they're nowhere around. This is why Machiavelli studied education and persuasion so carefully. He realized that the prince who could shape how people thought about problems would never need to micromanage solutions. The leader who could influence the assumptions people made would find that the right choices became obvious to everyone involved. Think about the most influential figures in your own life, the ones who truly changed your trajectory. They didn't just tell you what to do. They helped you see situations differently. They gave you new tools for thinking through challenges. They expanded your sense of what was possible or necessary. And years later, you still find yourself applying their frameworks to problems they never directly addressed. This level of influence requires patience and subtlety that most people lack. It means focusing on long-term transformation rather than immediate compliance. It means caring more about the quality of someone's reasoning than the speed of their agreement. It means understanding that the deepest influence happens slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. The 10th and final hidden law brings everything full circle. The most dangerous person in any room is not the one who appears most powerful, but the one who appears most harmless while holding the most cards. Machiavelli reserved his deepest respect for leaders who could project whatever image served their purpose, while maintaining complete clarity about their actual position. This isn't about deception for its own sake. It's about understanding that in a world where everyone is trying to read everyone else, the ability to control what you reveal becomes your greatest strategic advantage. While others exhaust themselves trying to appear impressive, you focus on being effective. While they worry about perception, you concentrate on position. The truly masterful understand that power often works best when it doesn't look like power at all. When it appears as helpfulness, as wisdom, as quiet competence, as genuine care for others' success. Because when people don't recognize power as power, they don't resist it. They welcome it. They seek it out. They become grateful for it. But here's what separates the Machiavellian approach from mere manipulation. It requires you to actually become valuable, not just appear valuable. The influence must be real, even if the presentation is strategic. The competence must be genuine, even if the confidence is calibrated. The care for others must be authentic, even if the timing is calculated. This is why studying these laws changes you. Not because they teach you to manipulate others, but because they force you to develop real capabilities worth concealing. They demand that you become someone worth following before you worry about being followed. They require you to build genuine value before you learn to present it strategically. The path forward isn't about implementing these laws like a checklist. It's about understanding the deeper principles they reveal about human nature, about influence, about the hidden dynamics that shape every interaction. It's about developing the patience to think in longer time frames, the discipline to control your reactions, the wisdom to see what others miss. Because once you understand how influence really works, not how we pretend it works, but how it actually operates in the real world, you can never go back to the naive approaches that most people rely on. You can't unsee the patterns once you've learned to recognize them. You can't return to playing on the surface level once you've glimpsed the deeper game. This knowledge comes with responsibility. The same principles that can help you build genuine influence can be used to exploit and manipulate. The choice of how to apply these insights reveals something fundamental about your character. Machiavelli understood this tension. He wasn't advocating for cruelty or deception. He was revealing the tools that already exist in the world and trusting his readers to use them wisely. The silent art of influence isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more strategic, more thoughtful, more effective at achieving goals that matter to you. It's about understanding the game well enough to play it with honor. It's about recognizing that true power comes not from controlling others, but from mastering yourself. In the end, Machiavelli's greatest insight wasn't about politics or power. It was about human nature itself, about the gap between how we think we operate and how we actually behave, about the difference between our conscious intentions and our unconscious patterns, about the reality that influence is always happening, whether we acknowledge it or not. The question isn't whether you'll encounter these dynamics. You will. The question is whether you'll understand them well enough to navigate them skillfully, ethically, and effectively. Whether you'll be the one shaping outcomes or simply reacting to decisions others have already made. The silent art of influence waits for no one. It operates in every conversation, every relationship, every moment where human beings interact. The only choice is whether you'll learn to see it, understand it, and use it in service of something greater than yourself. That's the real lesson Machiavelli left us. Not a manual for manipulation, but a mirror for self-awareness. Not tactics for exploitation, but tools for genuine leadership. Not shortcuts to power, but insights into the patient. Careful, deliberate work of building influence that serves everyone it touches. The silence has spoken. The choice of what to do with what you've heard is yours.